Hello, hello. I gotta work on getting my sound things correct. How is everyone? Happy New Year, Happy New Year. Um, is Weasel still alive? Weasel's definitely still alive. Like, you can't have Weasel just disappear and then be kind of referenced later on and not have Weasel be completely alive. Now, Weasel, by the way, if people don't remember, is one of Arya's traveling companions, and then when she gets picked up by by Raph the Sweetling, she just kind of runs off into the forest and is never caught, and then Arya later kind of like takes the name Weasel for a little bit, and yeah, Weasel's definitely alive somewhere. The question is where and like what the hell she's doing. She's definitely going to come back at some point. She's got to. She's got to. What else is pretty funny? Let's see. Somebody else asked an interesting thing here. Happy New Year's, Haviland Tough with a D. Planned it all. Yeah, this is from I think in various videos I alternate on whether I call him Haviland or Haviland. I think it's with a D. So I screw that up a lot. Is the sandship of Dorne a star destroyer? I don't know about that. I don't know about star destroyer, but it does seem to be a does seem to be something going on with the ship. I should read. A lot of people are really weirded out when I talk about like the ship in Sunspare. Let me see here. What's going on with my sidecar is frozen for some reason. Let me reconnect that. There we go. There we go. Let me bring up the actual quote for the sandship, because the sandship is really interesting. Let's see here. My feast. Go into the sandship. So it's like the sandship. My kid is home from school today, so if anybody hears anything, it's him. So they glimpse the towers of Sunspear to the east. First, the slender spear tower, 100.5 feet tall and crowned with a spear of gilded steel, added another 30 feet to its height. And then the mighty tower of the sun, with its dome and gold lead glass. Last, the dun-colored sandship, looking like it was some monstrous Drummond that had washed ashore and turned to stone. And then this Drummond, like an entire city, is shadowed from the sun underneath it in the Shadow City. And so it's like, what is this absolutely enormous ship that is sitting there on the beach? Now, some people say, oh, maybe it's just like a big rock, like Gibraltar or something. But then the idea that maybe it's some sort of like ancient ship from a previous time, and would it have to be as large as a Star Destroyer? I don't know if it'd be as large as a Star Destroyer, but certainly like a battleship of some sort would be big enough, or an oil tanker. Certainly, an oil tanker would be certainly, or aircraft carrier. Preston, have you traveled to India? I have been to India. I've been to India. I went to India for work, and I went to Delhi, Mumbai, and Nasik. But I have not seen very much of India, admittedly. Just kind of a few sites in those cities. I mean, in Agra and stuff. But I went in March, so India was quite nice, and not like any of the stories I heard, which are overwhelming. Could the overripe blood oranges be symbolic of heraldry rule being outdated. I feel like Dorne will be the door to a new system by the end. That's certainly what I would like. I think many people look at the Blood Oranges and they think about the Blood Oranges as being Doran's plans, and that Doran has been too slow to act, and his oranges are overripe. His plans are overripe. That's sort of a lot of people's first kind of gut belief about Doran. But in order to believe that about Doran, you kind of have to think that Doran is very honest about his plans. That everything he's told Arianne is just face value. That he really did plan on like marrying Arianne to Viserys, and he really did plan on bringing back Daenerys with Quentyn. That he had waited all of these years, all of these many years for that to be his plan. Like to put Quentyn on a boat with 5 dudes and hope that Daenerys would look at an old marriage pact between Viserys and Arianne and be like, yup, gonna marry you, Quentyn, and bring dragons back to Doran. But of course, it doesn't really make sense, because like Daenerys is useless without dragons, and how would Doran know that she had dragons for all of these many years that he's like waiting. So the idea is that somehow he has this old plan. He's honest that he has an old plan, but at the same time, like the plan that comes forward can't be old, right? So there's like this fundamental contradiction. Even if you were like, oh, the oranges represent his plans. Well, like, how could the plans be old? The plans have to be fresh, because Daenerys' dragons are fresh, So there's this fundamental contradiction with Doran, which is where the whole Dornish master plan kind of came from. Like, how do you reconcile the fact that Doran is supposedly this, like, master plan schemer who has this, like, game of Sci-Fi, and his plans are supposed to be equivalent to chess. And then he wants Arianne to like study all of these different books and be a master planner like him, with the fact that the plan that he's put forward is stupid. It's so utterly stupid. It's the dumbest thing you can possibly imagine. And so then you have to like reinterpret it and say, well, no, Doran must be lying about his plans. There must be some sort of like larger master plan scheme, which is at least for me, even if it's going forward with like the fanfic and stuff, like that would have to be better story than like Doran randomly like really was invested in Viserys Targaryen as his like master plan. Like that's dumb. That's just so dumb. Like how can anyone have that be a master plan? How can someone be like, I am a master chess player, and then it be like, my plan is Viserys. Like, it's just like, it so fundamentally doesn't fit. And so then you go back to the Blood Oranges and be like, well, could the Blood Oranges represent something else? And it would be nice, I think, like what you're saying, that the current system is the thing that's outdated and about to go splat on the ground, and that something resembling Dornish law, which Dornish law, we know very little of it right now, but we know it seems to have elements of social security, social justice, protection of individuals built in, and that somehow Dorne would want something closer to Dornish law to be probably even better than Dornish law to like rule throughout the kingdom. But it's funny because the Dornish master plan is a very like big complicated theory. Like I definitely have doubts at time, but at the same time, like when I go back and like look at the material again, I'm just like, no, like it can't be this current one. Like the current thing is ridiculous. As like large and complicated as the Dornish master plan can be, and how people are like, Preston, that's so complicated and stupid. Like, there's no way George R. R. Martin was thinking about this. And I sort of have my doubts. And then I look at like what's presented, and I'm like, well, what's presented is idiotic. It's so idiotic that it has to be something. Is it annoying getting memes super chats? I like my memes. The plot twist, they're actually grapefruits. That's true. They could be. In some countries, like lemons are green, and limes are yellow. Things are kind of screwed. They're actually grapefruits the entire time. They're ruby red, pink grapefruits, like not blood oranges. Hey Preston, what do you really think about Jaime's end? Love you guys, and thank you for you and Carmine for all your entertainment. Jaime. So it's funny being in the fandom for a long, long time, and so many years ago, before like the fandom became very large and complicated, and people would debate the kind of same things over and over again. R plus L equals J, and they really looked at Ice and Fire as a simple fantasy story. That it's really like dark now, but at the end, Jon is going to become king, and he's going to save the world through prophecy, and it's all going to loop back to like goodness. It's going to loop back to being a regular story, which was definitely like, it was so definitely like how people saw things. I think, and I'm just one contributor to this, but eventually more people got into it and were like, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's just not George R. R. Martin's style at all. It's not even like modern fantasy style at all. Like what are these people doing? That people started like thinking about different complexities. Now I'll say that the Jaime story and how many people were this was like headcanon for the entire fandom like 7 or 8 years ago, was that Jaime's oath really had to do with Jon, because everything had to do with Jon, and that his whole thing is that he failed to live up to his oath with Aerys, and so he was going to like renew his like Kingsguard oath with Jon and like defend Jon and like die for Jon. I thankfully like that kind of ridiculousness has like gone away on the fandom. And so now I really do think like when we look at the show and Jaime returning to Cersei and dying with Cersei, that and the White Book being filled with like Jaime's deeds, that does very much fit with what I think George R. R. Martin would plan for Jaime. I don't know about like getting a wound against Euron. I don't know if that fits, but he has a lot of stories about being obligated to ex-girlfriends and the oaths between us as people, the promises that we have between us as people being like the greatest morality and stuff like this. And so I could see like Jaime feeling like the promises and obligations that he has to Cersei and love being like being greater than everything else. So I could definitely like see that event happening. Now the show wasn't very explicit about it. The show was like Jaime just randomly leaves and goes back and dies. But those events seem pretty accurate. Like I just think that they would have expressed the reasoning more about like Jaime's morality, because Jaime's morality is a really, really important aspect of the plot. Jaime and Brienne and everything. Existentialism and finding your own moral code and things like that. So I think Jaime's journey and Jaime's end will involve that more moral exploration. But I think in George's mind, I think fundamentally, like, yeah, he did want Jaime to go die with Cersei and have his White Book filled at the end. I think that's kind of it's just so hitting the nail on the head with George's style. You said you aren't sure if the ending planned is the same show ending anymore. What are the biggest changes you think George R. R. Martin is likely to make? That's a very good question. Like, if I were George and I watched season 8 and I saw things like go out and how would I like shift things? I mean, I think some things are baked in. Like, you cannot like undo time traveling Bran or say Bran like ruling at the end or something like that. I think George is pretty set on that. But I think George would probably expand the roles of his minor characters, maybe dial back the Dany crazy stuff. I'm just thinking like the things that George did that aren't even very much his style, but he did anyway. Like, I think Crazy Dany may have been his plan. It's not very George of him to do, and he might have like, he might decide that that's just like not where he's going. Like once his writing like starts getting into those plots, getting into those stories. Because it's one thing to say like, oh yeah, this is what my plan is, and then when you're actually like writing somebody's feelings day to day, thinking, I don't know if it really fits, now that I'm actually writing it. And I think that might happen with Dany. Like, I think that Crazy Dany is just the Mad Queen kind of stuff. It's just so unnuanced and it's so weird and it's such a shift. And I think it's the thing that most people have the strongest negative reaction to with the show. I think that might be the big thing, is he'll probably tone down the Crazy Dany or make it more nuanced or something. Because it's really hard, especially when she's a point of view character, to like just have her do a 180 like switch to being crazy Cersei. So I think that's probably it. Yeah. This is interesting. In Andor, the cinematography of the Deidre Biz torture scene is exactly the same as the famous Leia Vader interrogation droid scene, down to the frame. Little details like that make Andor so great. That's interesting. I wouldn't have not expected that because the Vader Leia torture scene is very, very brief. You basically just have him walk in, she mouths off, and then they have the droid float in, and then you cut. And I remember the biz scenes. Maybe the first time Deidre comes in, I could see that. But of course, like there's later torture scenes that go on about the screaming children and stuff like that are more intense. So it's an interesting throwback that they would give. But yeah, Andor was great. As people people have watched the Carmine and my podcast about it. I ranked Andor the best show of 2022, though everybody's like, dude, you need to see Severance. You need to see Severance. Everybody's been telling me that I need to see Severance. Phil was on the stream last week and said we needed to see Severance, and that Severance was really the number one show of the year. So at some point, I'm gonna have to watch Severance. I know, it's just we'll see. Preston, are you going to investigate Jimmy's dream at some point? I think there was a full moon and his head was resting on a weirwood stump. Yeah, I've definitely read that section of Jimmy's story quite a bit. There's definitely some mind control on Jaime at that point, pushing him to this decision, which is funny because it's such an important personal growth moment for himself, about like free will and choosing your morality, that like having divine intervention, like switching you over, whether it be channeling through the moon or through the weirwood net or whatever. And George purposely had all of those elements at once in order to like confuse us. But it's funny that that there'd be mind control, like shifting Jaime on such an important moment in his life. like what's free will? Where's free will at this moment? Does Jaime have free will? When like, one of the most important decision he makes in the story is there. Maybe not the most, but yeah, it's I've read it a few times, but maybe I should I should probably revisit it sometime. Now that it's like more time traveling Bran is so important and redoing the timeline over and over again. Where is Wins, Preston? I mean, everything's getting worked on. Can you talk about the importance of Bran being an abomination and the significance it will have in the fanfic? Yeah, I mean, I really do kind of think that the abomination thing has to do with taboo and the human mind being limited and what it can do once it kind of like frees itself. I think it gets. I mean, once you read kind of Varamir Sixskins, and how far he's able to flex his telepathic abilities once he sort of sets the limitations of his morality aside. I think that's a big part of it. So I think like Bran. I think it's the same with Bran, like him and his time travel and him affecting people's minds and things like that, and making those steps, those immoral steps, to expand himself. I think that's an important thing. Thinking about what is taboo, because the big taboo thing. I mean, Varamir Sixskins talks about a bunch of things being rather taboo. You never do cannibalism. You never try to wrest a body of another person. And then Bran has done that. And Varamir Sixskins tries it at the end, but I think he's limited by this belief that he ought not to do it still. Or maybe he's not powerful enough, but I think like setting all of those things aside, if everything, it's very matrixy, right? Like what I believe I can do, I can do. I think there's a bit of that with the telepathy and how far one is able to push things. So I think like if you believe something is taboo and you shouldn't do it, it's going to limit your telepathic abilities. So I think that'll come up. Bran will be head and shoulders the hardest chapter to write. It's going to be so hard. But we're gonna eventually get to it and go into linking everything. But abomination is going to be a huge part of that. Where to end House of the Dragon? Aegon's coronation, death of Alicent. I think this all has to do with how successful the show is. So I mean, if it were me and I wanted a fourth season, I would do the regents and their rule, and then maybe even transition into Aegon the Third, because I do think that stuff is interesting, and you could do a show based on that. But if it's super successful, maybe they'll push that. But I think they're probably planning on ending it at, like currently they're probably just planning on the war and ending it with, say, Aegon the Third's coronation. But I would definitely have the rule of the regents myself, because then you've got Corlys on the throne, Hour of the Wolf. You got a lot of cool stuff that you can do. Hey Preston, do you think there's anything to Targaryen characteristics being gone after 2 to 3 generations versus other houses with consistent characteristics despite less incest? This significant, or George R. Martin's goof? I think that George R. Martin is I think he's, so the physical characteristics things is really quite stupid. Like, I think it's just like there's no reason the Starks should look the same or act the same or have any similarity over the course of thousands of years. the same with like the Danes or any of these sorts of people. When we start talking about the blood of the first men and all of this stuff and working abilities, it's really quite dumb. My headcanon way to get around this is that okay, the wildlings north of the wall are kind of pure, and the Flints, because they trade with the wildlings, might have some more wildling blood, and that the Starks come from the Flints, and therefore we're going to get some special abilities there. But then that doesn't explain Catelyn and everything else, and so it's not a very good like small theory. But he spends a lot of time like on these bloodlines, like, oh, then they married the daughters of the Greenseers, and that went into the Blackwoods, and the Blackwoods came down, and they've got blood of the first men. It's dumb. It's really, really dumb. Because there's just not that much incest going on. Or it would be all of the royal families. I mean, it's true that there are some like genetic disorders in like the Jewish community and stuff like this. But those are communities where they have been kind of like intermarrying with themselves for many generations. While there's nothing like that really says that people should be like only marrying within their royal family for thousands of years. Like, they should be marrying other people. Like, it shouldn't all be cousins and forever, for thousands of years. Should it? We don't see that in the family trees. Now, with the Targaryens, you have less time, so it's actually much more believable because they've only been here a few hundred years, and they practice incest pretty insanely with and so it is, you could say like up until Aegon's conquest, they're just being with the Valyrians and themselves, and so maybe they still have this pure blood or whatever, and with the genetic markers. But then like what to do about Targaryen characteristics like just vanishing, while sometimes they're dominant. And I don't know if there's much consistency. Like, he has in the dream that Rhaego's blonde hair, like Daenerys' child Rhaego has like Dothraki skin and like Targaryen blonde hair. He's got Baratheon black going over Targaryen silver, but then not in the next generation. So what's dominant and what's not? The Dornish, it was like 50% of them got Dornish black hair, and 50% of them got Targaryen silver. We'd have to go back and like go through every single marriage and figure out if it's realistic that something like disappeared or died off, or if it would come up later. But I'm trying to think, like, because Dornish Daenerys went down there. Like, why wouldn't there be just like nice Targaryen characteristics popping up among the Martell family, or something like that? I'm trying to think of that, like how many marriages happened where the Targaryens sent somebody to, there's like Oakenfists and like the Plums and things like that. I guess the Hightowers. So I don't know if it's like George hasn't given enough information really to properly judge whether or not it's super realistic or not. Lost my mother unexpectedly on October. Christmas was obviously sad without her, especially for my sister and 18-month nephew. Any thoughts to share on grief, parental relations as an adult, and fatherhood? Losing a parent is very odd because there's all the grief you have in your conscious mind, but there's also a lot of weird grief that happens in your subconscious mind. Like a year after my father died, like it was on the day, like I woke up in the middle of the night like crying, And I was like, what the hell is that? Like, I didn't even understand why I'd woken up in the middle of the night crying. And then I kind of like realized that it was 1 year later. So there's a lot of like odd stuff that even when you forget about stuff in your conscious mind, like it comes up later. And it comes up later with like, the way your kids look and like the things they say and the questions they ask. Like, my God, like the other day I'm my 3-year-old is, still screaming. I don't know if you can hear him, but like the other day my 3-year-old's been asking about opposites, and he's like, what's the opposite of up? What's the opposite of down? What are some other opposites? And eventually we came to alive and dead. And it's just like, my kid is like, Daddy, what's dead? I was like, well, dead is when you die. What's dead? What's to die? I'm like, well, to die is when you're broken. And he's like, what's to die? What's the opposite of die? Well, the opposite of die is alive. What's the opposite of alive? It's to die. What's dead? Like when you're broken. And it's like he asks the same questions over and over and over and over and over again. And like it's very emotional when you're like a 3-year-old child is like, what's dead? What's dead? Who's dead, Daddy? Who's dead? Listen, who are some people who are dead? And I'm like, I mean, everybody that's old is dead. Your grandfather is dead. Is your daddy dead? Yes, my daddy's dead. Is your daddy not alive? My daddy's not alive. Is your daddy dead? Like, and it's just like, boom, boom, like over and over and over. And like just the fact that like thinking about a 3-year-old child, like asking about death and life and knowing that he's going to like get on those topics and think about those topics and like, it's very emotional. It comes back at weird times. Like it's been many, many years now, since my father died. But like, when your 3-year-old is sitting there like asking like, Daddy, is your daddy dead? Like, yes, my dad's dead. Like, so like, I don't know. The grief never like completely goes away. Like, right now, like it's always with you. So I'd like to say it gets better, but I don't know. It just gets hidden. And then when it comes back again, Any recent horror films really disturbed me. It's funny because I try not to watch horror much anymore. And there's different types of horror movies. Like, there's horror movies where like there's jump scare horror movies, where just a killer is going around killing people, and I don't really care about that too much. But the ones that kind of disturb me are like when something like weird and creepy happens that like has long lasting effects. I definitely don't like all of those like fate's worse than death kind of like situations. But I'm trying to think of like a horror movie that really disturbed me. Hannibal disturbed me quite a bit, even though that's such a trash movie. But like the concept of eating your own brain is very odd. And that like really like messed with my head. Like, it's just so creepy. But I'm trying to think of like something that really like affected me horror wise. I guess I can't think of anything too much these days. I don't know. But yeah, I have to say like more weird science fiction can actually affect me more than like an actual horror movie. You know what's weird? I didn't even I didn't even watch this movie, and it's a children's movie, but someone I saw a those pitch meeting videos, and I watched a pitch meeting video about Jungle Cruise with The Rock, and apparently that like the plot of that is like people being frozen in stone, and like someone describes like being that they're like kind of conscious when they're frozen in stone, and it's hell, and like the villains are all frozen in stone at the end, and the heroes actually have like a flower that can unlock them, and then they don't. And it's like, what disturbed me is the fact that like yes, like someone being in hell is disturbing, but what was actually like more disturbing is that the other characters wouldn't care. That the other characters would be like, yeah, they're in hell. Okay, live my life. Like me as a viewer am like caught up on it and being like, oh my god, those people have been like left in hell. It's almost like more disturbing that the humanity around them would dismiss it than the actual hell. I guess that was kind of weird. The weird that like a children's movie I didn't even see can disturb me. What about the Orville? You gotta ask Carmine. I haven't seen any of it yet, but I never liked how the others played second fiddle to Cersei in the finale. What are your thoughts, and do you think it will change in the books? I think that's the original plan, is probably what we saw. It's not how I would have done it. Like I would have certainly like had the ending be about the others, because the beginning is about the others. But I think that might be like George's like fake out, trying to be different kind of thing. It might be something he changes in the end, because it doesn't really work, right? To have your climax early. But George, but it is very George. So George, a lot of his stories have kind of weird anti-climaxes to subvert expectations. So I'm gonna ruin a few of his books here, but like Fever Dream, the story, is about this like big riverboat called the Fever Dream, and like they kind of have a bunch of events happen on the boat, and then the boat disappears and it is in disrepair. But then he gets this story. He hears the story that the Fever Dream's been like put back on the water, and then they need to go find the villain and have one last battle on the water. And so the heroes like go to face the villains, and you're expecting this one big showdown like on the water in the Fever Dream, and it turns out the Fever Dream is like still a derelict ship and like was never restored, and there isn't some huge battle. They do fight the villain and everything, but it's like it's completely different. There is not one big climactic like thing that you're expecting, and they build it up. They're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have this one last battle on the river. Nope, it's not happened. It didn't happen at all. Or in Dying of the Light, you're kind of expecting this huge like one like battle with the villains, and then the villains end up all killing each other before the heroes even get to that point. So and then there's one last villain that he needs to face, and the book ends before that battle is even shown. So there's a lot of like weird fake outs with George R. Martin. And so, I think having the other battle early and then having the battle at the end be Cersei, like, or Daenerys, it sounds like George, but it takes someone like George and his writing skills to pull it off, like having to have an anticlimax be satisfying. Will Tyrion meet Tysha in the story or in the fanfic? I don't think George is going to have Tyrion meet Tysha. Now, I kind of want to have Hota meet Tysha, but and have her pop up. But I don't think it's necessary for Tyrion to meet Tysha. Tysha haunts him more in the abstract, and him not knowing what's happened to her. She's more haunting as a concept than she is as like an actual real human being that he would meet. Because like who he's gonna meet, it's like I think his thoughts and like how she ended up, like and never knowing if she actually loved him and things like that. That's just so much more traumatizing than meeting her and having closure. Like, so it actually kind of ruins the story to have him meet Tysha and have a resolution with her. Because, you know, say she ended up like in a horrible situation. Well, now he knows that she ended up in a horrible situation, you know, and that's bad, but the mystery of like not knowing if she ended up in a horrible situation is actually kind of worse and more torturing for Tyrion. So funny if Aegon won the throne and was a great leader, but once it leaks he's a Blackfire, the people rise up for Dany, presumably a bad ruler. Status quo meme. Yeah, that would be funny though. There's just not enough. There's just not enough time, right? There's not enough time to really like know if Aegon is going to be a good ruler or not. So there, you know, there's some hints here and there that like he might have a temper, but doesn't everybody have a temper? You know, it's too bad we haven't been really given enough about Aegon to really know his personality, and you know, is there even enough time to really get to know him? I don't know. You know, I think the sad thing is that like it's, you know, it's more likely he's going to get like grayscale and die that way than actually like face Dany. But there's, you know, there's supposed to be a second Dance of the Dragons, so I don't know who's going to be actually riding the dragon, but it would be interesting nonetheless. But you know, will he get grayscale and go insane like John Con or whatever? I don't know. Perhaps. Have you seen Annihilation? It's one of my favorite sci-fi movies and is really disturbing on different levels. From the director of Ex Machina. Let's see, Annihilation. Let me see about this. Psychological horror film. You know what film actually like made me also upset in the same sense as just hearing about River Cruise was Being John Malkovich. And it was like not even the fact that like the character at the end gets trapped like watching someone else's life in the background. It was the fact that like no one else thought about what they were doing as being immoral. Like it was just so disturbing that every character is like, oh yes, we're just going to take over John Malkovich's body, and everyone's like, yes, that makes sense. Okay, you know, like it was just it's odd. It was like, I guess the cruelty of people can be very just is a very disturbing concept to me. Okay. Lena, biology professor and army veteran, loses her husband and is deployed to special forces. She believes he accepted his suicide mission because she cheated on him, and then he reappears. Called an ambulance, and there's a mysterious zone called the Shimmer with a meteor. This is getting complicated. After entering the Shimmer, the group awakes to realize that they've already traveled several days but have no memory. All the wildlife of the Shimmer is mutated. The plants are shaped like people. The Shimmer distorts information like a prism. Lena arrives at the lighthouse and discovers a video camera next to her corpse. Shows that Kane telling the camera person to find Lena, killing himself. Phosphorus grenade. Jeez. I mean, it sounds like a weird kind of invasion of the body snatchers situation, but also like psychologically altering people's minds, so you're not sure what's true, what's real or not. I mean, reading the plot summary, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. But like, that seems to be somewhat going on. That it's kind of an invasion of the body snatchers, plus like not knowing what one's mind. Tysha would probably hate Tyrion now. I mean, definitely, considering he like participated in the gang rape. That's the creepiest, weirdest part of the whole thing. Do you know what was in Maester Jon's letter to the Citadel, or are you a filthy gardener? Yes. Yes or no answer is fine. No spoilers. I do. I do know what Jon put in his letter to the Citadel. Like, I know what Maester John Vance in the I know what Maester Jon thinks is wrong with the world, and I think Jon is right. Like, he doesn't have the details, but yeah, I think Maester Jon genuinely figured out roughly what is wrong with the world, and what is wrong with the seasons, and it's in the letter. Like, his idea is in the letter. But yes, I figured it out. It's not a gardening thing, or I didn't figure it out. I put, like, Jon figured it out. There is a solution in that letter to why the seasons are out of whack. And you know, it's in the prologue. Like, it's right there. Like, I've got to bring up the prologue here. Okay. Okay, hold on a second. Okay. So here we have the prologue. And then let's see here. Oh, it's probably gonna be this. Like, we go here. He stepped back from the tube and looked up at the stars with his naked eyes, thinking of all he did not know. He thought of lemons and a great river flowing into itself, of iron older than writing, dragonglass forged beneath the earth and pushed somehow to its surface. He thought of a weirwood sapling growing into a hulking tree over 1,000 years, a wall unchanged beside it, seasons turning and turning above. He felt the weight of the air upon his head, the wobble of the earth beneath his feet, the touch of a kiss upon his lips. Like that, I mean, you know, I'm not going to spoil exactly like what is going on, but in that is the subject matter of what Maester Jon thinks is wrong with the world. So, you know, it definitely relates to the wall. Like, the seasons and why they're out of whack definitely relate to the wall, you know? And so, you know, his theory is definitely in the letter, and it's definitely sent there. What realistic gift do you want George R. Martin to give in 2023? So he's not going to announce wins in 2023, okay? That's just not going to happen. So, like, people can, like, stop like thinking about that. Like, it's just, if he's honest and he's 75% done, he's not going to be listing. He's not going to be announcing this year, you know? 2024 maybe, 2025 maybe, but no, impossible that it's going to be 2023. So what gift can he give us this year? I mean, I would freaking love a sample chapter, but I don't think that's also going to happen. Like, that's something he could give us, but I don't think he will. But what gift can he realistically give us? Realistically, he can give us, like, he can tell us that, like, all of the side projects like fell apart, and like there's not going to be 10,000 ships or snow, and they're just going forward with House of the Dragon, and he's got a lot more time on his hands, and that Peacock, like, is not going forward with wild cards and things like that. But you know, that's about all he can do. All he can do is sit down and read. I mean, not sit down and write. Like, that's the gift that he can give us. But because he's not going to give us anything bigger than that. But sit down and write. Um, I've been thinking about lemons. It's obvious that the Braavosi are importing lemon trees to make lemon batteries, powering ancient alien tech, of course. Obvious if you think about it, of course. Um, Stannis does Great Northern Conspiracy, wins the Battle of Ice, takes Winterfell, and then he's betrayed. Mel's resurrection accidentally targets Jon. Yeah, a lot of people think about this, like, okay, that if Mel believes the pink letter, even if Stannis is not dead, Mel reads the pink letter, thinks Stannis is dead, and tries to resurrect him, and then resurrects Jon. Like, some people like have that theory. I think the Northern Conspiracy, the Northern Conspiracy should help Stannis, at least in the short run. The question is if Ramsay will overwhelm that anyway with his trickery, which if we go by the show, it's very likely. I think the only line that makes me think that the show is true is the fact that, like, Stannis dismisses Ramsay and Theon's like, don't dismiss Ramsay, and he's like, whatever, what battles has he won? That makes me think, Stannis is in trouble. That level of arrogance is a little troubling. But so it could be that Stannis wins in the short term and then loses in the long term. But we'll see. There's so little time left that it's hard to believe like too much can happen, because the others do need to invade at some point. Like, they need to invade. Annihilation is the US version of the Russian movie Stalker. Stop, Preston, stop. I think this was too many spoilers or something. He will never finish the book. Books talk is depressing. I always hope for the best. I mean, he's not going to finish the books. He's never finishing Dream for Spring. I mean, let's just be realistic. I mean, come on. It's just not happening. I mean, will he finish Winds of Winter? Maybe. No time soon. I mean, maybe, 4 years? Maybe. I mean, my big regret with the fanfic is that we didn't start like 3 or 4 years ago. That's like at so many points I'm just like, man, I wish we would have done this years ago instead of now. Because I think about how far we have to go, which is like 4 years, and it's had we started earlier, it would have would be closer to the end, and then it would be nicer. What if he releases it free on ebook? George R. Martin? No, he'd never do that. George R. Martin likes his money. He's certainly. I love these. It's impossible to secretly hoping that he does drop a book at the end of 2023. He's not doing it. There's no secret book. There's nothing. Like, there's no George is secretly working on 2 books at once. He's further than he says. There's none of that. None of that is true. There's just none of that. Yeah, I don't think D&D thought of the Battle of the Bastards themselves. Therefore, Ramsay should not lose to Stannis. Yeah, I mean, there might be, Ramsay might have a sneaky plan to get it. So, that's my. I mean, granted, like, George R. R. Martin like gardens a bit, so you can kind of read every event, but there's so much that happens in the show that there are elements in the book. Like, even when they made Ilaria evil in the show, and a lot of fans were like, wait, I don't understand. Like, Ilaria in the books is like the exact opposite of Ilaria in the show. And it's like, well, that's true, but it's not entirely true. There are some things that are a bit suspicious. You know, having the sand snakes be in all of these, the younger sand snakes, be in spying positions, like, doesn't make any sense. Like, if Ilaria is trying to avoid war, why would she send Elia Sand with Ariane on their mission? It makes no, like, that makes no sense unless she's trying to spy, you know, like making out with the Raven Tender, you know, who has all of the information and stuff like that. Like, it's a little suspicious. Like, why would you spread your kids out? Like, the better to survive the carnage. So you're going to send one right into the carnage? Like, that's just ridiculous. Ridiculous. We all thought it would happen in 2022, then 2021, then 2020. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, I remember the old Reddit polls, because they had a big bell curve years ago, and the farthest out was like 2020. Like, of the hundreds of fans that were like responding, like, no one thought it was going to be like past 2020, but here we are. Oh. Why would evil, powerful Euron obey Balon's exile? Oh, we don't know if he was powerful back then. You know, he certainly left, and you know, he may have also like wanted to be exiled or something. You know, why Euron does what Euron does is a bit strange, but I know what you're saying. Like, okay, say that Euron at a young age was visited by the Three-Eyed Crow and has been getting these messages, the same as Bran, and you know, he's told to molest and rape Victarion's wife. Though it's also quite interesting if Victarion's wife had consensual. I think it's a much more interesting story if Victarion's wife had consensual sex with Euron. And that Victarion is just like a moron. That's a much more interesting story. But the and then because Victarion's horrible, like like what? So, you know, he goes off and he uncovers a lot of secrets around the world, awakens his mind telepathically, things like this, and then eventually comes back. You know, I mean, it's odd. Like, if you want to leave, just leave. Like, why force yourself into exile? And you know, I don't know. But you know, did Euron plan it all? Did he actually really want to leave and get himself exiled? You know, on purpose. But Preston, any thoughts on Septa Maestras? I think, I don't think there's any female Maesters other than Larys, but there is a question of, like, you know, there's knowledge with Septons as well, right? Like, Septons write things. Like, in our real world, like, monks and everything recorded a lot of knowledge, and there was a lot of education and learning amongst Septons. But then the question is about, like, what was nunnery life like? What did they do with women? Like, obviously, like, education of women was not prioritized historically. But I have been doing some reading up on what nuns' lives were like, and it's more interesting than you think, you know, because there's actually, like, because these convents were all women, the women had to take on really fascinating roles. Like, there were like big beefy nuns who would, like, work the fields and do manual labor and things like that, because that was just the state of things. You needed to have, like, somebody to physically do it. I forgot the name of it. Was it I forgot if they called them, was it field nun or something? there were these work nuns, and I'm trying to remember the actual word. I have to like find it again, but it's very funny. But one would think that there would have to be like if they're praying all the time, like wouldn't they want to be able to read the religious texts for their prayers and stuff like that? Shouldn't they be able to read? Shouldn't there be some education? Um, but yeah, nuns followed similar regimen to monks, although less strenuous physical labor. Their community is also self-governing under elected abbesses who had authority unprecedented for women at the time. Just as brides had to bring dowries to their marriages, nuns were expected to bring dowries to their convents, which tended to create a division between richer and poorer houses, reflected the social classes of nuns. Many nuns were as learned as their male counterparts, who wrote treatises and devotional works. The German nun Hervostiva was widely known for her religious dramas, a rare genre at the time, poetry and histories. In both East and West, there were, for a time, double monasteries of both monks and nuns, sometimes under the authority of abbesses. Monks did the heavy physical labor, and nuns made the monks' robes, but were completely separate from each other in daily lives. Abbots and abbesses were the parents of a family, but above all, the spiritual master of a school of divine services. The highest monastic virtue was humility, and obedience was the virtue that defined monastic life. The life was considered distinct from the priestly calling, and the early Benedictines ordained that only enough priests to celebrate the Eucharist for the community. So, I think all of those things are some fascinating things to look into. Like that, yeah, like if you're talking about throwing people off to the faith, like, yeah, there'd be highborn, educated women, and there'd be poor or less educated women. There'd be like beefy women to do work, and there'd be, other ones to like organize and do the office work and even have time to write and read and teach others. So I think it's going to be fascinating when we get to the Hota story, and him exploring that. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really fun, to just see the different types of septas out there. Because yeah, I mean, septas writing poetry. She probably thinks Ellie has a lost cause. Send her on a hopeless mission. It's a very dangerous mission, to send your 14-year-old daughter into a war zone where she says, like, as a lady not a lance, like, and then her others, she sends one to Sunspear and one to the Water Gardens, and then keeps one at home. Like, if there's going to be an attack on Dorne, Sunspear would be one of the big places, and then Doran is at the Water Gardens. So it just, the idea that you're spreading them out to protect them doesn't make any sense. Like if I were going to protect 4 children, I would send them to Essos, like to 4 different cities. I would send one to Bravos, one to Pentos, one to Lys, one to Tyrosh, and then they better survive the carnage. But if war is coming to Dorne, and like, why would you send them to places where the battles are going to happen? Like send them to, I mean, the Hellholt is probably pretty safe, but send them to Sandstone, send them, the places in the middle of nowhere. It just makes so much more sense that they're there to spy. You've got the Castellan at Sunspear, you have Doran, you have Arianne, and then you have just like one kept with her. But it just makes the youngest, I think. So it just makes much more sense that they're there to spy, which hints at a nefarious purpose for Ilaria. Let's see here. What's your favorite pasta dish? I always liked ravioli, but it's one of those things where you go and you order ravioli and they bring you out 4 little raviolis and you're like, man, I'm gonna be hungry after this. But yeah, if price were not an issue, and I could order like, you know, 5 ravioli dishes, it's ravioli. Beefy nuns. Huh, monks and nuns also bred a lot of horses, dogs, and rabbits. Interesting. Muscle nuns. I think they're called lay. Now that I think about it, I think they were called lay nuns or something, which is lay sisters. Or something. I'm trying to think of the beefy nuns. I mean, it sounds really weird to be like lay nuns. When the war ended, my grandmother's parents picked her up from the convent. They picked up another girl too. It was my grandmother's sister, and they didn't even know they were sisters. That's yeah, I mean, maybe they were just like, oh, these. Maybe they like the look of them. They're like, I'm gonna go for the best looking nuns, and they of course they're sisters, you know, best looking girls. Le nuns. New gym bro Halloween is gonna be beefy nuns. Huh, the Spanish monks bred many Andalusian war horses. That's interesting. I mean, you know, they had to do something, right? I think this is where, like, didn't a lot of the monks, like, make honey? Hello. How goes it?
Preston, what is going on?
Your boy got arrested in Romania.
Yo, stop it. I was going to say that to you. I know, you got that from me. I was going to say that to you. I was going to say that to you. How dare you get to that first? Because I was doing the Tucker Carlson thing, and you got that to me first.
We've been hearing a lot that's happening in Romania, and many are asking questions. You should be asking questions, you know. Like,
Preston, for those of you who don't know, Preston is doing a Tucker Carlson impression. There's a
I mean, I'm not gonna be as good as Come Town, but come on.
Oh, his is amazing. His is amazing. Can we talk about? Do you mind? I sent you a message on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it, but if you don't mind, can we discuss briefly George's recent blog post about some of the spinoffs not coming to fruition?
Yeah, sure. So some people, George R. R. Martin did say that a couple of spinoffs have been shelved, and this is
they should be.
Yeah. And the idea being that he must be talking about 10,000 ships and the sea snake stuff, right? But then he also mentioned that you can like bring stuff off of the shelf just as easily as you put it on, which is all very true. But yeah, he did. I mean, I imagine though, like he said, a couple. I imagine that if you're going to go forward with one, you're going to go forward with Snow, right? Carmine?
You're talking to me?
Yeah.
No. My estimation here is that the surefire ones would be Dunk and Egg because we have material for that. That's the safe bet.
Fair enough.
And the Jon Snow one because Jon Snow is incredibly popular. So therefore, Jon Snow. Who doesn't love Jon Snow?
Who doesn't love Jon Snow?
Who doesn't love Jon Snow? So those are the two I can see. Everything else is just like unnecessary. And once again, this harkens back to that Twitter post, which I was just looking for just now that I made months ago that people got on my dick for. Nobody wants all these random ass spinoffs. I liked Corlys in the show. I think Steve Toussaint did a phenomenal job. But who the fuck wants a Corlys spinoff over anything Blackfire related, over Dunk and Egg, over Robert's Rebellion?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we need to go to Yi Ti when we can just do a Marco Polo
Right.
spinoff? Why do we need
By the way, just I have to say 7-layer beefy nun burrito apparently, and then we're on to excited about the snow show. This is these weird things about like, look, they can get a great actor to do younger Corlys, but the problem is that like it's very hard to match the original. Like when the original is loved, like how much, like even when you get a replacement. They're not loved as much. Like, and I'm thinking about Professor X. It's not like McAvoy did a bad job as Professor X. No one would say he did, but he's also not Patrick Stewart. You know, I'm trying to think of some others where it's like the younger version is fine. They did a great job, but like like Harrison Ford, like the guy that played Harrison Ford's like young Harrison Ford in Solo, did a great job. He's still not Harrison Ford, you know? And so it's like, when you do a Corlys show, you're going to have to get a younger Corlys. But it's not going to be the Corlys that we see. Like, we like that Corlys in the show. You know, we don't necessarily want any Corlys, you know?
Real quick, who's the kid that played Harrison Ford in the Solo film? Who's the guy that did that?
Alden Elric? Alden Elric?
Okay. Can you post this? I'm sending you the better Harrison Ford.
Yeah. We've talked about this before. The guy who looks even more
Have we
like.
talked about it before?
Yeah.
Yeah, Anthony Ingruber.
Yeah. We've talked about them before.
Mm-hmm. Also, on the spin-off discussion, these are the spin-offs that were proposed. Snow is not on there yet. So if you want to put this up for people to see, these are the Game of Thrones spin-offs. Obviously, House of the Dragon, that's there. Game of Thrones, blah. So they had 10,000 ships, the Hedge Knight,
This is the guy he's talking about. Yeah, he definitely looks like a young Harrison Ford. He has more of the look. But the guy that they got was fine.
That's Anthony Ingruber.
Yeah. He certainly looks like him, yeah.
But we don't need all these fucking... We don't. We never did. I know people hate that I fucking say that. You don't speak for all of us. Suck my dick. I speak for you. We don't need all of these spin-offs. We don't.
My opinions are not only secretly fact. They're secretly your opinions.
I do it like... God, people annoy me so much. But we don't, though. And we don't. Like, who wants E.T.? Just do, the Three Empires, the Chinese Wu, Wei, and Shu. Just do that.
Yeah.
But no, Snow, I can see them doing because, everybody likes Jon Snow.
Can we talk more about Andrew Tate? Can we talk more about Andrew Tate for a second?
Oh, did you want to talk about, like...
Because I want to talk. Look, not just like that Andrew Tate, who is a horrible sex trafficker, who deserves to be in prison. But I want to talk about like what it represents, like thematically, right? The fact that this like supposed like pusher of like chauvinism and like quote unquote masculinity is like finds his end, and hopefully this is the end to him. Like even if he's released or whatever, gets off on a technicality, like hopefully like he will disappear from the zeitgeist. But like the character of who he is emulated so much in various degrees. You know what I'm talking about? Like the whole like bro MMA wearing aviators, hit that shit kind of like attitude. Do you think like that, like, do you think it's a strike to that as well? Like, do you think we're going to see less of the aviator dude, the aviator bro masculinity dude, like in the days to come?
I don't know. Do you think that we saw less of the weirdo Trump supporters after Trump was elected?
Well, I'm saying like now that he's out of office, don't we see fewer of them? Like now that he lost, don't we see
fewer of them? We see fewer of them because the grift is now shifting to DeSantis.
Yeah, it's a different. But DeSantis has a completely different. DeSantis has a completely different like thing to him.
but he's more DeSantis is more strategic. So it's either Andrew Tate now, Andrew Tate forever, or someone worse than Andrew Tate. There's never like anything less. Maybe I don't know. There's a lot of pushback, but there's a lot of people who are falling for the Andrew Tate bullshit. There's this woman I know, and on Facebook she was.
Yeah, are there some people that maybe fall for the Andrew Tate bullshit? Are there some people that maybe fall for the Andrew Tate bullshit? Do you think? Do you think
don't know if those guys?
Do you think there's anything similar? Do you think there's anything similar?
Who is this? Who are you? Did you go to someone's Facebook? Who is this?
No, I just fucking Googled. You don't know who that is?
I don't know who that is. Who is that?
That's Critical Drinker.
That C-Man?
That's Critical Drinker.
No.
Yeah.
I thought it was for a minute I thought it was who's the guy from The Boys? C-Man guy. Who's
I
thought that was the Deep for a minute.
You thought it was the Deep? No.
I thought it was the Deep. I didn't
know.
No,
I know. Look, and I know I'm not being fair. Like, obviously, like I don't like that individual's not in the same universe. He's not a rapist. He's not doing sex trafficking. But he's tapping into the same feeling, that same movement of like, this is what masculinity is. Let us like push this as masculinity, and feminism is a problem. Like there are these like hints of chauvinism and crafting one's identity that are in that. Now I do not want to like say that this person is like kidnapping people. God damn.
I have an idea about this. My question about this, and I've never met an Andrew Tate fan. I don't know. Besides that one woman who, sweetie, come on, stop. Like, Andrew Tate would not show you any mercy. There was a video that was released or leaked of Andrew Tate slapping some woman on his bed, and it for a minute it looked like it like joking around, but no, he was seriously slapping her and hitting her with his belt. I want to ask Andrew Tate fans. He's all about escaping the matrix and free thinking, but then he also has these guidelines, almost arbitrary guidelines on how to be a real man. So what is it? You're either a free thinker or you have to follow these guidelines to be masculine. You can't almost do both, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see the contradiction in a lot of these people's complaints, because on the one hand, like these kind of like insecure incel types, they on the one hand think that the problem with the world are the Giga Chads, but at the other hand, they think the problem with the world are the soy boys. Like ruining masculinity. So like, which is it? Like, is the problem that these like ultra masculine Giga Chads? Are they the problem because they're stealing all the women and women are falling for that shit? Or is the problem the soy boys who are like ruining masculinity and changing women to being overly powerful and not understanding that they need a nice guy? Like there's no cohesive message. It just seems to be women bad, me good. Like that's it. Man, oh man. Having traveled so much, where's the best food? Malaysia. The best food is in Malaysia. The Malaysians have the best food. Like, just hands down. Because Malaysia has the best mix of Chinese, Thai, Indian, and Malay food. Like Indonesian Malay food. And it comes together and it's just blended perfectly and it is delicious. And what's going on? Hold on a second. What's going on, Luca? Come here. What's going on?
I just want to put a button and see.
Oh, you just want to press a... What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
I'll make it off you
What?
now.
Oh, really?
Because I'm done.
You're done? Okay.
Daddy, I want to press the button.
Hey, come on, Sky. Come on here.
Okay. Very good.
Do, 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 do,
Okay. So, what were we talking about, Carmine? Food. Okay. Are you there, Carmine?
Yes, sir. I think I'm echoing. Maybe
What's happening? To what degree do you think the story would change if Arryn was born male? Interesting idea that came to me when I watched your series on House of the Dragon. I mean, in one respect, it would make a big deal in the sense that, like, why wasn't Viserys married to Rhaenys? Like, Rhaenys Viserys marriage just made so much sense. Why did it not happen? Rhaenys sought out and wanted to marry Corlys, but when she did that, she was actually fairly late. She was actually like 18 or 19 years old. Like, why wasn't she already betrothed early on? And the only I mean, obviously the real explanation is so that the story could happen. But like, if there was another explanation, it's, well, we're going to try to the Maesters were conspiring, or Septon Barth was conspiring in there and like pushing the marriages to the right place, and that had Emma Arryn not been born, or had Emma Arryn been born male, some other situation would have happened. Some other marriage would have happened, and the same result would have happened. Like, the Maesters were trying to have the Dance of the Dragons happen. They were trying to have the Targaryens fight themselves. They would have found some way to do it. So yeah, in one way, like, Emma Arryn being male would have changed a lot, but on the other hand, like, it probably wouldn't have changed anything. But do you think McAvoy could play Picard in the Next Generation reboot? That'd be really funny, by the way, to use James McAvoy as Picard, because he already played him but we used Tom Hardy, right? Wasn't Tom Hardy already Picard? Young Picard?
Yes, wasn't he young Picard in Nemesis?
Yeah. So we have a few young Picards out there. Ones that have played. I mean, obviously, there's also the one from this flashback. There's the young Picard that played him in the episode where they became little kids. My number one dad. You're my number one dad. I don't even remember that line. Have you watched all of Next Gen, Carmine? You just watched Deep Space Nine.
I've watched all of Deep Space Nine, some episodes here and there of TNG.
There's this ridiculous. There's Tom Hardy as young Picard, which is ridiculous because, like, in the show, Picard had hair when he was at the Starfleet Academy, but they thought that people would be confused, and so they made him bald at Starfleet Academy so that the audience wouldn't be confused. They wouldn't be like, "Oh, is that Picard?" Yes, of course, it's fucking Picard. It's so funny, but we have quite a few young Picards, but that episode is a weird one. So they use the transporter, and there's a transporter malfunction, and they all become children. So it's Picard, Ensign Ro, Guinan, and O'Brien's wife Keiko. And I remember years ago, and this is really like one of these gross things, like someone being like, "Man, what if they like never got reverted? Like, what would O'Brien do? Considering his like wife looks like she's like 12 years old, like, but she's actually an adult. So like, there's not really anything wrong with it because she's an adult, but at the same time, she looks like a little kid. And everybody's like, dude, you're just being gross. Like, stop it." It's like the reverse of Big, Please don't ever stop these lives. For some reason, you and Carmine talking about anything is so entertaining. Haha. Happy New Year's, guys. Thank you.
See, yes, I agree. It always bums me out when anybody, and specifically your whale right there, who always wants to get into Ice and Fire. Let's talk about more about Andrew Tate and Tucker Carlson. What is going on?
What is going on? What is going on? Why does it? It may seem like people are trying to erase masculinity, and the reason it seems this is because they are.
And the Democrats want this.
The Democrats want this. Why do the Democrats hate America? Is it because Republicans are too masculine? Some think this is true. I would be one of them. Oh, man. Thoughts on the Bran violating Mira theory? So there's different things about this, but I think there's one specifically about whether or not Bran reached out. So there's a moment where Bran is I forget if he's in Hodor or if he's in his own body, but he thinks about wanting to reach out and hugging Mira. And he's thinking about reaching out to her, and then she gets up and runs away. And there's this theory that and I actually kind of subscribe to it. I think it's true that that he was, when he was reaching out for her, he was inadvertently trying to wrest her body from her in the same way that he wrests Hodor's body from him. And so let me see if I can briefly get the what is it? They don't use the word hug in Ice and Fire. Here we go. Bran hated being crippled then. Don't cry, he said. He wanted to put his arms around her, hold her tight the way his mother used to hold him back in Winterfell when he'd hurt himself. She was right there, only a few feet from him, but so far from his reach that it might be 100 leagues. To touch her, he would need to pull himself along the ground with his hands, dragging his legs behind him. The floor was rough and uneven and would be slow going, full of scrapes and bumps. I could put on Hodor's skin, he thought. I could hold her and pat her on the back. The thought made Bran feel strange, but he was still thinking it when Mira bolted from the fire, back out into the darkness of the tunnels. He heard her steps recede until there was nothing but the voices of the singers. So, the fact that paragraph goes on and on and on is just fishy. And so, and within that paragraph, he's thinking about reaching out for her. He's thinking about warging Hodor. So I do tend to think that at that moment he was inadvertently trying to wrest her body from her, and so so I do think that was happening, and that she sensed something and it felt off, and so she ran. The Sparrows sought protection from the faith. Oh, Sparrows sought protection for the faith. That means the Brotherhood without banners have Sparrows, and that's another reason for the split. Stoneheart's group have a ton of vengeful religious extremists. The problem with this theory, so there's a lot of oddness going on in the Riverlands with beliefs. Okay, so they definitely had some people in the Riverlands who were into both the Faith of the Seven and completely fine with lore, because the Brotherhood without banners were okay. The Brotherhood without banners follows lore, but the question is could Sparrows be willing to align with the Brotherhood without banners? And we really think about it, the Sparrows are pretty religiously strict. You'd think that they would never, ever, ever have anything to do with the Brotherhood without banners, knowing that the Brotherhood without banners follows lore. And even if we go with the split, Gendry is definitely a follower of lore. Thoros of Myr is definitely a follower of R'hllor. So they, the Lady Stoneheart faction is definitely still R'hllor followers. Now, what happened with Beric and I'd say the Greenbeard, Edric Dane branch, I don't know. None of those characters really seem too into the religion, but Greenbeard as well wouldn't be a follower of the Faith of the Seven. So I don't know if I can really link the Sparrows with being aligned with the Brotherhood, but oh no, let's see. I'm way behind on our chats. I'd caught up, Carmine, and then you came in and everyone started talking again.
Speaking of which, let me hang up and join back in so I can fix this echo. I don't know why it's there. 1 second.
I don't hear it. Are the Sparrows based on the Spanish Inquisition? I don't know if they're based on it specifically. I mean, keep in mind there's plenty of moments in history where the where religion starts, trying to purify and get back to basics, get back, it seems like it's always doing that, right? Trying to go back to some pure time that didn't really exist. I'm sure someone could find a better time, a better situation where there was some extremist pope that wanted to really take control. Because keep in mind that Spain, I mean, I don't know if George R. Martin is going to know that much about Spanish history, but Spain always had a rather strict religious element, or at least hundreds of years before when the Inquisition supposedly started, and then after, and so and at the same time they were being pretty crazy over in Byzantium, and that was not the Spanish Inquisition, and so everyone's being crazy religious everywhere. I mean, I'm just trying to think of more specific parallels to when a pope or something comes into power and would try to cause the kings to really clamp down. I'm trying, I'm sure someone can come up with something, but I don't know if the Spanish Inquisition would be really it for me. Just knowing how the Spanish Inquisition worked. Because the Sparrow movement seems more about changing things from the top down, while the Inquisition was really about bottom up kind of stuff. It was sending people out and making sure priests were teaching the right thing, and making sure individual citizens were believing the right thing, rather than converting the king and making sure that the king was in line with the Pope. Because there wasn't unity between Spain and the Pope, at least with the kings. So it gets complicated. I'm sure someone can find something that's a little more accurate, or which Pope would fit best. Why do the others take Craster's sheep? That's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. Do the others eat? Okay, so Gilly says, I was going to breed the rabbits. There's no sheep left. And they mention again, did you see any lambs? There was sheepfold, but no sheeps. No sheep. Come the white cold, he does. Of late, it comes more often. That's why he started giving them sheep, even though he has a taste for mutton. Only now the sheep's gone. Craster has no sheep nor any sons. Yeah, no, this is definitely a mystery that needs to be resolved. Like, I mean, I guess the others must eat, but like, what are they doing with sheep? What are they doing with, like, you're not making sheep into the others. Other sheep? Is there an entire, like, flock of other sheep out there? Like, I'm not talking, like, white sheep. I'm talking, like, other sheep. Huh. And, like, why would they be, like, satisfied with that? Like, oh, you didn't give me a baby, but you gave me some sheep. I guess they must eat. Or something. But, yeah, huh. That's an odd one. No. What about the new Israeli government? Oh God. This just must make Israelis so sad that we can be that we back with Netanyahu again. Like, oh my gosh, what a horror. By the way, I'm completely done with Bill Maher. Like, I'm just done. Like, there's no excuse for him now. He had Netanyahu on the other day and was just like throwing him these softball questions, and it's just like, oh God, like, you're just the worst. Like, it's just the worst. It's just, it must be so sad and depressing and disheartening to be like, to have this like old right winger, like corrupt dude back in power again with his smug face. Like, oh God, like, it'd just be like, it would be like having Trump back for like a fourth term, and you just be like, oh God, I'm so sick of this. Ugh. Will the Brotherhood without banners fight Bannister Hasty's Holy 100? I think they have bigger fish to fry. The Brotherhood without banners right now is like, seems to be focused on phrase, right? And if I were to guess, the Brotherhood without banners would have a lot of reasons to join Aegon cause. Hello. Hey there.
All right, hopefully it doesn't echo. Jesus
Yeah, I
Christ.
didn't hear.
Sorry,
I didn't hear any. But I just don't see. I don't see the Brotherhood without banners having any reason to fight Bonifer Hasty. Like, Bonifer Hasty, I do think has reasons to support the Aegon cause, and I think the Brotherhood without banners has reasons to support the Aegon cause. So I think it would. I think they would have more of a reason to be aligned eventually, but rather than actually like fighting each other. The Brotherhood without banners has bigger fish to fry than let's see, the Sheep Army. No one talks. So Carmine, while you were gone, we were talking about how like the others, when they went to Craster's Keep, when he doesn't have sons, he gives them sheep, but then he ran out of sheep. And so the question is, like, what are the others doing with all those sheep?
Your theory was that they need his sons for the DNA, right?
Yeah. Or that they're just like new others. Yeah, that his sons have the right DNA. His sons have the right DNA to either like be others or to like breed and produce more others. But yeah, I think to be others. Because, originally the others were called Neverborn. The wives call the others Craster's. They call them Craster's sons. So the idea is that they're actually like Craster's sons.
I don't think George figured it out yet when
No,
he
he's
was
just like,
writing that.
Daddy,
what's going on?
for you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Okay. I got it. Thank you, Sky Guy. Okay. But yeah, I was saying, like, are they transforming the sheep too, or do they just, the others must eat? The others just must want food. Like, the simplest explanation is that the others eat. Theory: Jaime and Cersei dying together is another announced plan, born from Cersei's narcissism and manipulation of Jaime for most of their lives. They'll not die together in George R. R. Martin's final books. It's perhaps, but we will see. I think it's fitting that they die together. I think it's fitting that they don't die together. I think both work. So somebody said it gets lonely in the land of always winter. Now we know what that sheep. Now we know what the sheep are doing. Andrew Tate is free. No, he's not. He's in jail for 30 days.
Yeah, what is that? I keep seeing this all the time.
So he was arrested. He was brought in for questioning like 9 months ago, and he was brought in and then was like released. And he had an interview about how he was like released with no charges. And so a lot of people like to get clicks have been like announcing that he's been released from prison, and are like, dude, he's free. And he's not. He's in jail for 30 days, awaiting like more investigation and trial. Here we go. St. Bartholomew Day Massacre, Catholic mob violence versus the Huguenots, instigated by Catherine de Medici, after marriage of King's sister to Protestant Harry Navarre, Marcella Tristan marriage. See right there, there's something that like probably fits the Sparrows more. Keep in mind that like George R. R. Martin, even though he puts in like obviously the Dornish have Spanish elements, he's more of an English, French, German history person than he is a Spanish or Italian history person. Not that he doesn't know anything, but it's just there. In light of recent discoveries, what are the chances that George R. R. Martin include a new group of people who act as an allegory of the Jewish people? Well, I don't know what the recent discoveries are, but related to this, Carmine, do you know what he's talking about? Has George R. R. Martin mentioned anything about Judaism at all? But
if George himself has mentioned anything in regards to Jews, then I don't know. But I guess this person's question is: you think George R. R. Martin would add a new group of people in the series, in the books, that could serve as Jewish, being persecuted as such, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, there's a little bit of it amongst the in the Dornish story. Also, the Dornish story being very Spanish, and a lot of the Jews being in Spain. But I don't necessarily I don't know if he's so focused on it really. I'm trying to think of various moments that might like parallel Jewish history, and there doesn't seem to be much in it. Like again, George was raised a Catholic and knows a lot about Catholicism, but it's actually like kind of funny how little there is about like Protestant thought in George's work, which is really quite funny considering that like America is Protestant dominated. And so we kind of think like Protestants, but he was raised Catholic, so he thinks very much like a Catholic. And so, I don't know. It's just one of those things I don't necessarily think George is focused on. I've read some articles about like Dany being this like blonde girl thinking she knows best for Slaver's Bay.
Uh-oh.
In this sort of like those people that complain about like people going to Africa and doing aid work, and they're like, oh, you're trying to be white savior and all of that, and it's like I think George's criticisms of like colonialism, and he has lots of criticisms of colonialism and like military adventures in like Iraq and Vietnam. But I don't necessarily think he frames it as like white savior kind of stuff. I just don't George isn't that focused on certain subjects. just because he focuses on other stuff. So I might be wrong, but I'm just trying to think of like how, like when, like, George ever written about Jews? Has he written about Judaism? Does he know much about Judaism?
Or something akin to it. For example, Mr. Ahmed E. here, good example. The exodus of the Roy people parallels the Hebrews.
Yeah, it could be, but there's like leaving the Roinar, leaving the Nile, and like finding a new land and things like that. There's certainly some of that, I think, with the Dornish story, but at the same time, like, George is an atheist and doesn't like religion, and so he's also not going to like hold up like the Jewish way of life as being a something that we should emulate either. So it's a so he may feel a lot of sympathy for the pain that they suffered through the ages, but at the same time, like, he wouldn't hold them up as like as the right answer either, because they'd be too religious. Abu Lail. Someone remembers my Abu Lail story. Abu Lail, a friend of mine, was a Peace Corps volunteer in a village in Jordan, and he one of the guys in the village was called Abu Lail. Lail means nice. It means night in Arabic. So if you meet a girl named Layla is a beautiful girl's name for being like, she's called night, but it's the female version of it, Layla. So Lail, Abu Lail was the father of the night, because he would go out and have sex with people's goats and sheep in the night. So we called him Abu Lail behind his back. Thoughts on Larys' character in the show and his motivations? I definitely think that Larys is a I think he is trying to get the Targaryen factions to fight each other and die. I think he is, in my personal opinion, I think he's aligned with the Old Town forces, even more so than the High Towers, and is like a true believer and is willing to like have everybody die in order to get the Targaryens to kill themselves. I think that's his higher motivation, is that he wants the death of dragons, and thinks that like the death of dragons is the moral thing to do, and that everything is, the ends justify the means. In a sense, he's kind of the reverse of Varys, because Varys, trying to bring back the dragons and the end justifying the means to get to that end. But just kind of in reverse. I am Layla, I am of the night. Yes, the Dark Star.
By the way, I did not know that what you said, Layla, is like a beautiful name for a girl's name for in Arabic, right?
Yeah.
In Moon Knight, Mark Spector, Moon Knight, his love interest, her name was Layla.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I just got that now.
Put it
That's
together.
really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, they have the I'm trying to think of some other let me bring up some good Arabic girl names.
On the topic of Moon Knight real quick, did you get any backlash for your best shows of 2020, and did you get any worst shows yet?
What's funny, it's not that the one thing, I think some people thought I put Russian Doll season 2 a little too high and House of the Dragon a little too low. Like, some people were like, maybe you should switch that. It's not that people didn't agree that like Andor and Peacemaker or even his Dark Materials should be on the top. Like, people were fine with that. They were a little like, wait a minute, is Russian Doll season 2, does it really deserve the number 5 spot? House of the Dragon should have maybe been up like a little higher. That's about it. I think some people were surprised that I had mentioned She-Hulk. People that hadn't seen it. I think people that have seen She-Hulk know that it's pretty good. I think people that haven't seen She-Hulk and then have watched all of these like reviews trashing it are like, but I heard She-Hulk was bad. I was like, well, did you watch She-Hulk? Because She-Hulk's actually pretty funny, you know. So I got a few
Plus,
messages
they don't even watch
like
She-Hulk when they watch Critical Drinker watch She-Hulk.
Yeah, exactly.
They got it.
Yeah, so like if you actually watch She-Hulk, it's a pretty good show, and so like the negative reviews of She-Hulk like make no sense. In fact, the negative reviews of She-Hulk make less sense than the negative reviews of Rings of Power. I think some people are like, why didn't you mention Rings of Power as being horrible? Because you and I both think Rings of Power is completely mid, right? Like it's just like boring, middle of the road, like not good, not bad.
There was a guy in my comment section going, I have never once heard you or Preston say that Rings of Power was mid. You're just defending it. Homie, and I had to go like.
It's like we're a broken record.
I get a video from my channel, from your channel on one of your streams, and from Men of the West channel. Both of us agreeing that it was fucking middle of the road fine. Like people don't understand that something can just be okay and decent or whatever instead of just hating it or liking it. People thought you were trolling when you said you liked She-Hulk as much as you did.
No, She-Hulk's really funny. Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand like. I think the only way that you would not like She-Hulk is if you took it seriously, and it's a comedy show. Like it's like taking Scrubs and being like, oh fucking, they just don't understand medicine, you know? Like it's a comedy show. Like no one would be running around a hospital like running pranks on each other. There'd be no janitor at a hospital like harassing a doctor like that. That just wouldn't happen. Like this is a ridiculous show. Like,
you know why they didn't complain about Scrubs?
Yeah.
You know why they didn't? It's because Nerdrotic didn't complain about Scrubs. That's why they didn't complain about Scrubs. Seriously, these people feel like fucking zombies, like all the time, echoing the same jargon. It's almost like it's not even their own opinion. It's just they're just speakers for these other guys. Like, come on, guys, have your own opinions. Don't echo shit.
There's some enemies of fire. There's some enemies of fire will keep away. Bears, direwolves, and other things. Other things sounds like they already know. Definitely in that first opening, the characters definitely like think about the others and know about the others and fear them. At least on a supernatural sense, and so does Uncle Benjen when he's talking to Tyrion and Jon. Like he definitely is like, no, we're the Night's Watch and we have like real like we have a real job that you don't understand. Like there's definitely an element of the Night's Watch that like believes that the others are out there, which is kind of like a weird, you know, walk back later. I mean, they were all pretty quick to believe that the others existed. Granted, there was an animated zombie running around, but like the Night's Watch, like right from the beginning, we were like, yep, the others are back, the others are real. You know, there was never like a ha ha snarks and grumpkins among the Night's Watch. I think they all like understood. Like they still had the three calls, like the three horns. They're all taught about the three horns. They're all taught what three horns means. Like even Chet, when he hears that three horns, he immediately like wets his pants. Like, cause he believes, he knows, like they all believe. So like, yeah, definitely in the prologue, like they're talking about the others. They all believe in the others right from the beginning. It's only people not in the Night's Watch, you know? Anyway, because I'm let's see. Let it echo. I hear no echo from me, but then again, I'm in a different.
You're doing something on your end. I'm fine here. I have done nothing normal. It's Preston. He's doing something.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, I have to go pretty soon. Cut this short because I've been resting everything on my wife's shoulders here because my kids are home from, or my kid is home from school today because of the new year. So maybe one last question. She-Hulk was supposed to be funny. It was pretty funny. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, You didn't think, first of all, like, you didn't think, like, Daredevil doing a walk of shame is fucking funny? Like, come on, Carmine, you must have laughed at Daredevil doing a walk of shame, right?
That was funny, but I'll be very honest. For me, She-Hulk was mid. It was whatever. You liked it more than I did. I thought it was whatever.
Because, I mean...
It wasn't bad.
Because I don't know, like, I accepted that it was a comedy show, and I was there to, like, laugh at the jokes. And so, like, the Marvel Universe is ridiculous. Also, I remember the comic, and so, like, I was, like, looking for the comic, and it was like the comic. Because, you know, so... I don't know what people were expecting. You know, like, were they expecting something serious, you know? But, you know, what else was I thought it was very funny that, like, the woman released a She-Hulk line of perfume. because that's a really interesting that's a really interesting question. I think in the comic book they actually deal with some similar issues, because copyright protection only protects things you're trying to sell. So if some guy was called Spider-Man and you wanted to release a product called Spider-Man, like, he's not selling anything, so that's not copyrighted. He hasn't created an artistic thing to sell. And so also he can't go to court to defend himself because he's got a secret identity, you know? So there's some very interesting things like that.
Someone asked you if you liked Ally McBeal.
Ally McBeal, there were episodes of Ally McBeal that are pretty funny. It's also not realistic, but, like, there's Ally McBeal was off and on. I've only seen a few episodes here and there, and then some were really funny, and then some were, like, not that funny. What are you wearing, She-Hulk? Carmine, why don't you say Baba Booey anymore?
Because Howard Stern fucking sucks, and the Stern Show has sucked for, like, the longest time. For me, the Stern Show died when Artie Lang left. Unfortunately, had to leave, and he wouldn't bring Artie back, and it just has not been good in over a decade. Before, this is like Stern lore. Before Howard banned Hansi, much like fucking Hansi. Hansi made a very good point. Howard lived long enough to see himself become Don Imus. 110% agree with that. Like, just the show is not as good as it used to be. And I'm not saying that Howard needs hookers and strippers on all the time to be as good. It's just not on the same quality as it was back in 2007.
Baba Booey was, like, one of Howard Stern's, like, sidekicks. Back when Howard
Gary
Stern,
Delabate,
yeah, Howard Stern had a heyday where he had a bunch of sidekicks that were all kind of he had a whole, like, entourage of, like, interesting people. I agree with criticisms of She-Hulk that they built fan baiting into the show. It doesn't make Jessica Gao smart or clever. She took the easy road. I mean, I don't see what's wrong with the fan baiting one way or the other. Like, the Starship Troopers was marketed on a fan baiting method, and it was fucking brilliant, and it's one of the things I fucking love about Starship Troopers. If you guys don't, maybe a lot of you are too young, but when Starship Troopers is a sci-fi book written by a right-winger, and he really, like, unironically wrote the science fiction universe where only people that fight in the military get citizenship, because he believed that way you had an investment in the state. And that all people, like, military service should be like required of all people. And, like, it's an unironic book about, like, this boy, like, fighting bugs in space, right? So they did this adaptation, and they fucking just, like, go to task on the book. They're like, this book is shit, and, like, adapt it and make the heroes a bunch of fucking right-wing Nazis. And then they went and marketed the thing as a action adventure, like with like using Blur's song number 2, like as like the tagline. They're like, woohoo, showing explosions and everything, trying to get like the, oh yeah, action adventure, go see it. And I'm just thinking of all these people that like went to go see an action adventure and then got this like tongue-in-cheek political commentary like thrown in their faces. And it's so funny, you know, like it's I like love that they fucking baited everyone, and that it was like that's one of the most brilliant aspects of Starship Troopers. So She-Hulk
I gotta ask, how did people bait She-Hulk? Like, how did Jessica Gao bait in She-Hulk? I don't understand that.
I think so. They're saying that like because the ads for She-Hulk focused very much on her being a woman and dealing with like the hardships of being a woman, that was the advertising campaign. And granted, that's a good deal of the show. I'm not saying it's the majority of the show. The majority of the show is kind of like irreverent jokes about the Marvel Universe. But part of the show is like, it's hard being a woman. And it's part of the plot too, considering that like, and then at the end, it kind of becomes meta where like she's focusing on the villains of the show are people like trashing the show because it's about women. And that's how it was marketed, knowing that these people would come out of the woodwork to trash the show. So like the critics of the show become the villains of the show at the end in a meta way, right? Which I do think is quite clever. Like I do think the whole structure of it is clever. Now, Carmine, your criticism of the ending was not that it wasn't clever, but it wasn't necessarily entertaining. And that it didn't give
it was them trying to be too meta with it. I don't like meta stuff. That's just me.
Yeah, or like that it didn't have the same punch of like a final battle or kind of situation. But I think the whole structure of everything was quite clever. Clever doesn't necessarily mean it lands. I could agree with someone to say that it just didn't land. But I do think that the whole structure of it was quite clever. That you create a show, marketing it as like jokes about how hard it is to be a woman in the modern world, because it is hard to be a woman in the modern world, and it's hard to be a woman in all times, you know, like and then you know what's going to happen when you market that, and then you build that into the plot. I mean, I think that's quite clever. I don't understand like what's not clever about it. But anyway, I've got to go pretty soon. Last super chat here. St. Bartholomew's Massacre wasn't Spain or Italy. Catherine de Medici was was Queen of France, wife of Henry II, mother of Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III. The wedding that turned into the massacre was his daughter Margaret. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to look this up. Obviously, when I heard Medici, you kind of think that it's Italy or something. But yeah, that's some interesting stuff. Anyway, I've got to get going. Thank you all for being with me. I will see you all next week. Carmine, thank you for being with me.
Yeah.
What was that?
I said, yeah, no problem. I got you. Oh, by the way, before you go, shout out to Glidus for finally hitting 100K. Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody,
100,000. Oh.
Say congrats to Glidus.
I hope he's doing okay. I you know. hope he's I don't know, having a good New Year. I guess he's busy around the New Year's right now. But all right, we'll talk to you soon. Later.